Hi boys and girls, Mrs. Clayton and Pete the Cat here. Are you guys excited about Science Camp Week? I know we are, aren't we? He wanted to give you guys a little bit of a wave. So before we talk about what science is, I have a very special book to read. It's called Ada Twist, Scientist, and it's about a little girl who's very curious. So before we talk about maybe what science is, we're going to read a story. So Pete, you snuggle in, get ready for your story, and we're going to read Ada Twist, Scientist by Andrea Beatty. Ada Marie, said not a word till the day she was 3. She bounced in her crib and looked all around, observing the world but not making a sound. She learned how to climb and made her big break, with a trail of chaos left in her wake. She ran through the day chasing each sound and sight, and didn't slow down until she conked out at night. Her parents were frazzled, but tried to not freak, as Ada grew bigger and still did not speak. Clearly Ada, with lots in her head, would have something to say when it ought to be said. You see how curious she is? That's just what happened when Ada turned 3. She tore through the house on a fact-finding spree and climbed at the clock just as high as she could. Her parents yelled stop, as good parents would. Ada's chin quivered, but she did not cry. She took a deep breath and simply asked, why? Why does it tick? And why does it talk? Why don't we call it a granddaughter clock? Why are there pointy things stuck to a rose? Why are there hairs up inside of your nose? She started with why, then what, how, and when. By bedtime she came back to why once again. She drifted to sleep as her dazed parents smile at a curious thought of their curious child, who wanted to know what the world was about. They kissed her and whispered, you'll figure it out. Can you tell how curious she is? Her parents kept up with their high-flying kid, whose questions and chaos both grew as she did. Even Miss Greer found her hands were quite full when young Ada's chaos wreaked havoc at school. But this much was clear about Miss Ada Twist. She had all the traits of a great scientist, because to be a good scientist, you want to ask lots of questions. I hope this week you ask lots of questions. Ada was busy that first day of spring, testing the sounds that made mockingbirds sing, when a horrible stench whacked her right in the nose, a pungent aroma that curled up her toes. Zowie, said Ada, which got her to thinking. What is the source of this terrible stinking? How does a nose know there's something to smell? And does it still stink if there's no nose to tell? She rattled off questions and tapped on her chin. She started to start where she ought to begin. A mystery, a riddle, a puzzle, a quest. This was the moment that Ada loved best. Ada did research to learn all she could of smelling and smells, both stinky and good. One hypothesis Ada thought could be true. The terrible stink came from Dad's cabbage stew. She tested and tested, but soon Ada knew it was time to come up with hypothesis 2. A hypothesis, boys and girls, is another word for a guess. Then zowie! The stink struck again, just like that. Hypothesis 2. It's caused by the cat. The cat couldn't make such a stink on its own. It needed perfume and some fancy cologne. So young Ada Twist tested. The test was a flop. She started again, but her parents yelled, stop! I don't think putting a cat in a dryer is a very good idea, boys and girls. Ada Marie, to the thinking chair now by the time we count 3. Enough, said her mother. That's it, said her dad. Her parents were frustrated, frazzled, and mad. Why? Ada questioned. Her mother said no. What? Ada queried. Her father said go. You've ruined our supper. You've made the cat stink. Enough with your questions. Now sit there and think. She looked at her parents. Her heart turned to goo. Poor Ada Twist didn't know what to do. She sat all alone by herself in the hall, and Ada Twist, once more, could say nothing at all. And so Ada sat, and she sat, and she sat, and she thought about science and Stu and the cat, and how her experiments made such a big mess. Does it have to be so? Is that part of success? Are messes a problem? And well, she was thinking, what was the source of that terrible stinking? Ada Marie did what scientists do. She asked a small question, and then she asked two. And each of those led her to 3 questions more, and some of those questions resulted in 4. As Ada got thinking, she really dug in. She scribbled her questions and tapped on her chin. She started at why, then what, how, and when. At the end of the hall, she reached why once again. You'll notice, boys and girls, this week as we do some experiments, you're going to be asking why or how or when. Her parents calmed down and they came back to talk. They looked at the hallway and just had a gawk. No patch of bare paint could be seen on the wall. The thinking chair now was the great thinking hall. They watched their young daughter inside as they did. What would they do with this curious kid who wanted to know what the world was about? They smiled and whispered, "We'll figure it out." And that's what they did, because that's what you do when your kid has a passion and a heart that is true. They made their world. Now they're all in the act of helping young Ada sort fiction from fact. She asked lots of questions. How could she resist? It's all in the heart of a young scientist. I love, boys and girls, that her family noticed that she loved science and wanted to help her with it. That's a great thing to do. And as for that smell, what can Ada Twist do but to learn all she can with her friends in grade 2? Will they discover the stink that curls toes? Well, that's a question, and someday, who knows? Maybe someday she'll finally figure it out. That's the end of the book, boys and girls. I wonder, what do you think that smell was? So this week, boys and girls, we're going to be doing lots of science projects, and you're going to be asking lots of questions as you're doing them. Why is that happening? What do you think is going to happen next? So make sure you ask those types of questions, because this week, boys and girls, me, Pete the cat, and you guys, we're all scientists. See you later, boys and girls.